Now, Maddy, welcome. I need to start over. Okay, let's start the whole meeting over. I'll do all the introductions again, explain star voting again. But no, Maddy, I'll let you take the stage.
Okay. Thank you so much, David. My name is Maddy Capozzi. I work with Dark Matter Labs. We're an international nonprofit. We work on different projects related to systems change, social, ecological, economic transition, big range of radical ideas and visions and attempts to actually make things happen in the real world. And today I'm here with Emily Harris, my colleague at Dark Matter Labs, who has, thank you, Wendy. My colleague Emily Harris, who has developed this methodology called Cornerstone Indicators as part of our work on economics and well-being economies. And so I'll be presenting that today. So I'm going to share my screen. Does everybody see that?
Yeah,
perfect. Great. Okay. Right. So today I'll be presenting a project called Cornerstone Indicators. At Dark Matter Labs, we've been asking the question of how we can use metrics and indicators as powerful tools to drive transition to a new economy. So this initiative, we've been co-developing it with diverse communities in different places, and we hope it will form a part of that transition. Yes, you guys see the second slide?
Yeah.
Great. Okay, so in a nutshell, Cornerstone Indicators are community-designed measures of thriving that combine multiple data points into intuitively understandable indicators. So on this slide, I'm showing some community-designed indicators that were developed in Sweden with the city of Västerås. So for example, in the first image, you can see the number of people who feel at peace on a Sunday night. This is supposed to be sort of like a measure of holistic well-being that captures many different things in one indicator. But before we get into the details, I'm just going to give a quick overview of the wider intention around this area of our work. So the first thread that I want to highlight is the idea that indicators can act as social connectors. We're living in a volatile moment. Tensions and social pressures are rising. We already have numerous measures and policies designed to promote societal well-being. In fact, we probably have more measures than we know what to do with. But for many of us, the link between our personal day-to-day challenges and the structural issues that underpin them remains unclear. One example would be the affordability of housing for first-time house buyers and an income-based tax system that makes it very difficult for people who don't already own things like property or shares to save enough to change that. The disconnect is leading to a widening gap between the necessary, so for example, reducing our global carbon emissions, and the possible, such as electing a government that pledges to restrict air travel. To bridge this gap, we need to create new and beautiful visions of what possible means in our everyday lives to reclaim a sense of agency. So one way that we hope to do that is by empowering communities to discuss and understand what it means to thrive, and then collaboratively designing indicators that track progress. There are already many strong examples of beyond GDP frameworks, as I'm sure you all know. So some examples are Scotland's National Performance Framework, New Zealand's Wellbeing Budget, and Canada's Index of Wellbeing. Despite this, they're still acting in the margins, and they have not been meaningfully embedded into our political systems. The reasons for this are complex, but one observation is that existing beyond GDP measures tend to be technocratic, top-down, and also value-laden. If beyond GDP movements are ever going to be more than political lip service, then it seems obvious the measures will need to be informed by citizens and contextually grounded. One way of thinking about this is as an imbalance in the democratic triangle, where the vested interests and market dynamics are driving changes that benefit the few at the expense of the many. We want to ground future policy in the third leg of the triangle, the citizens. So all of us. That way our voices can be heard and translated into meaningful action. The second pillar of cornerstones that I want to touch on is the idea that indicators can act as buffer metrics. This principle aims to avoid the erosion of often unnoticed stocks and flows of value in pursuit of a defined one. To give a more tangible example, we can think about results-based financing for carbon reduction, which is something that the World Bank is really keen on at the moment. If the outcome being paid for is carbon reduction, how can we make sure that we do not create known or unknown harm to other elements of the system in pursuit of that one goal? Perhaps in an attempt to reduce emissions, we reduce bus services and add cycle lanes, but a side effect is that elderly members of the community become more isolated. Or perhaps we redevelop an abandoned wasteland and fill it with solar panels without realizing that the area had an important yet unknown role in local biodiversity, which subsequently declines. If multi-point and multi-sensory indicators are used to validate outcomes, the risks can be reduced. In the cornerstone work, we are attempting to do this by co-designing indicators that combine multiple data points and include non-quantifiable elements, such as how people feel about the indicator itself. So building on all of that, I want to give some examples from existing cornerstone projects around the world. Each time we do a project, we try to build and share new knowledge so that ultimately we will become redundant and communities can run the process independently. So this is a little bit small, but this shows the journey in Vastras, where the first prototype was developed. The process was quite detailed and complicated, but in summary, it involved statistical modeling combined with citizen-led conversational data. And so these are the indicators again. And in the Swedish pilot, we ended up with 5 indicators that were really beautifully illustrated by a designer at DM called Vlad. You can see that they are pretty diverse. So as mentioned earlier, number of people who feel at peace on a Sunday night. Then after that, number of people who partake in an activity outside of the household each week. Number of people who would recommend someone else to move to Vastras. And so to dig into detail a bit more, I want to illustrate how this works for 2 indicators. The first indicator measures the number of people who enjoy not owning a car. As a narrative, we can say that people feel safe to mix, they're confident in public transport services, physically able to use active transport, and empowered to act on the climate emergency. Behind the narrative, you can see the dimensions and metrics that contribute to the indicator. These include measurable aspects such as level of trust, physical health, air quality, and public transport links. It's important to note that the indicator also includes how people feel about the indicator itself. The second indicator measures the number of people who have a dream, plan, or goal that stretches more than 1 year into the future. As a narrative, it indicates that people have a positive outlook. They feel confident that they'll be looked after as they age or suffer illness. They see opportunities to develop, and they have a sense of security in their social environment. Themes being represented include a good work-life balance, safety and security, and levels of personal autonomy. Measurable dimensions include a varied employment market, physical health, and climate positive behaviors. We're now running our third iteration of this project. So the first project was in Västerås in Sweden with a relatively small focused community. This is where we did a deep dive into the data and how to create living indicators from it. The second was in Scotland, and this time we worked at a scale to test an online workshop tool and then feed the outputs back to a Scottish government consultation on the national performance indicators. The current live project happening right now is in Montreal, Canada, which is where I'm based. Besides generating a set of indicators of the community, a big part of this current project will be to strengthen the resources and launch a website. We also want to focus on a strong setup so that the process will be as practically useful as possible. This involves matching the process to important governance decisions for the community right from the outset, so they can be used for collective decision-making. Yeah, that's it from me. So I guess now we can open it up for any thoughts or questions, unless we want to go straight to the next presentation. I'm not sure what you had planned, David.
No, that'd be great. Thank you, Maddy. That was great. I'd love for you to just introduce yourself and Emily and Maham, I believe, and maybe Tara, give Tara a chance to talk about herself too. Great. And if you'd shut off screen share, we could see everybody again. Welcome everybody to come on camera if they like, so they can see other people. But yeah, if you just maybe tell us a little bit about Dark Matters and introduce Emily and Maham.
Yeah,
Sure.
Do you want me to introduce myself?
Sure.
Absolutely.
We do.
I mean, I'd love you to, Maddy, but I can also do that. Thank you so much for the presentation. Yeah, hi. So I'm Emily, also from Dark Matter Labs, and I lead the finance and economic innovation work there. Just a tiny bit of background, maybe how this all came together. So I, for my sins, used to work for Deloitte in the City of London in corporate finance for many years, and then retrained as a regenerative economist, and at that time met and worked quite closely with Kate Raworth. So the kind of seeds of where this kind of idea of bringing metrics and narratives together in a more holistic way kind of started there. And then just to say, when we first started developing the cornerstone indicators, it was with Catherine Trebek of the Wellbeing Economy Alliance. So many kind of stars aligned to bring this work forwards. So yeah, that's just like a tiny bit of background, but we'd love to talk it through and fill in details. But Tara, do you want to come in from how we're working together now?
Sure. Yeah, nice to see everyone here and some familiar faces as well. My name's Tara Campbell. I'm based in Edmonton, Alberta in Canada, and I work for an environmental NGO here called the David Suzuki Foundation. I've got my colleague Maham here as well. I'll let her introduce herself after I go. But yeah, we have a program on well-being economies at the foundation. So we do a few different things related to that. One is around developing a hub of the Wellbeing Economy Alliance here in Canada. So we're kind of the Canadian counterpart in some ways to We All California. But we're also doing some projects that are less so under the banner of that alliance building work and more kind of experimental in communities. So we partnered with Dark Matter Labs to bring this approach to a city in Canada. So yeah, as Maddy mentioned, we're working with a community in Montreal on this, and we're figuring out how we can share it more broadly in Canada as well. And yeah, I'll pass it to Maham to say hi too.
Thanks, Shara. Yeah, not much left for me to say except, my name is Maham, and I am based in Ottawa, Canada, which sometimes people don't know is the capital, not Toronto. And yeah, it's just been really fun working with Dark Matter and to see where this project goes ahead.
Thank you all. Maddy, is there anything else you want to add about you or your work before we start taking questions? Or
Sure. I guess I can just add that I'm joining this project also for the third iteration in Montreal, and mostly leading the community engagement with a neighborhood called Milton Park. So doing that kind of on the ground work of mobilization and planning the in-person workshops, which has been really, really, really fun. And yes, in general at Dark Matter Labs, I work a little bit on the economics work. Also, we do featuring foresight work that I'm involved in. And yeah, I'll leave it at that.
awesome. Well, let's open it up to people who have questions. It'd be great if you come on camera and ask your question directly instead of in the chat. But if you're shy and you prefer putting it in the chat, you could do that too. And also, Maddy mentioned fun. We just want to say, even though we're discussing making things better, we're allowed to have fun. So don't get too wild, but just we don't have to be too sober either. So who has a question to start us out with? Didicus, I knew I could count on you. And then we'll go to Ted after you. Your phone needs to come off mute. How about I go to Ted and we'll come back right back to you. So Ted, go ahead.
Sure. Hello, everyone. I just wonder if you could say a few things about some data that you've collected. Maybe if you've only been doing it a short period of time, and how you're collecting the data. What method you use to do that, so you can chart your progress.
Yeah, that's probably a question for me, I'm guessing. So that's fine. No, we've been doing it for a while, just in different places. So Ted, is your question, how are we collecting the data after the indicators have been designed? So how are we validating the indicators themselves, or how are we collecting all the data to design them in the first place? Which?
The former, how you're collecting data after you have established the tools, the questions.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so once we have the indicator, so obviously each indicator will represent something like 30 to 60 data points behind it. The whole point is that we don't collect that data. So the indicator, if that indicator is going up, then it will be a mix of all of those different things that are considered to be important. So half the point is that indicator can then not be gamed, right? So the design of the indicator in the first place, we're going into huge amounts of detail. So we looked right across like OECD data sets of all the statistics of, for example, in Sweden, and then combined that with all of the participatory data that was coming in, so that we could see all of the things that were most important. And then that was used to cluster and design those indicators. And then two things go on. So one is that, so they are being actively used. I'll give you an example and then I'll stop. But in Sweden right now, so they're using those indicators, and it doesn't stop them gathering all of the like data points behind it, right? So that city will still be looking at things like particles per million of air quality, for example. But then they're also holding that in balance with the indicator. So, for example, one thing that happened recently in Västerås is that the indicator at the end that Maddy was talking about, where the number of people who have a plan, dream, or goal that stretches more than 1 year into the future, that indicator was actually falling, but the school results were massively increasing. And so the civil servants and politicians there have actually taken a change in their policy, which is really interesting because they were previously just using those school results as a good indicator of kind of sense of purpose about the future for that age group. And now they've had to dig in and go, what else is happening?
Can you hear me now, David?
We can. I did.
Okay, yeah. I use my phone for my microphone and the computer for my image. I just wanted to ask you guys, are you publishing your data in any way or anywhere? Because what I'm doing is I work with the Public Bank East Bay and also with strong towns and with village towns and here in the San Francisco Bay Area. And we're trying to figure out a metrics of how effective the bank will be. It's not open yet. It's in development. And to do that, it sounds like a lot of what you're using for criteria is exactly what we need to do that. So are you publishing? And then how do you gather your data? Is it voluntary or is it how? Just what method do you use to actually gather your data?
I feel like that's maybe like the same question again, but just for a bank. I don't know. Maybe I didn't answer it very well the first time, but we're not gathering all the data points behind the indicators once they've been designed. I don't know if that makes sense to you. So we're gathering all of the data to design them. And then like, are they published? So in Vesteros, yes, they publish the results of their indicators. So they will be publishing whether the number of people who enjoy owning a car is going up or down. But we're not publishing personally behind that, like how reliable the transport stats are or all of those things. That's for that administration to compare with the indicators. If that makes sense.
Kind of. It's a little bit less than I was looking for, but I appreciate your answer. Thank you.
Okay.
Sophie, welcome.
Hey everyone, thank you so much. Super inspiring to hear about this work. Maybe I'll reframe the question of I have a different question, but I feel compelled after the past two. There may be a curiosity, I guess, of just what's the main maintenance in reflecting with the indicators? People like, because it's powered with these other data points, do the communities just then it's kind of on auto, like as those other data points are empowered, then people are able to check back in with the indicators. I'd be curious, like how are the indicators continued to be engaged past it? But my question, I'm wondering if that might help support some of the other inquiry folks. My question was actually more at the forefront of the design and just how you all do the community engagement, like partnering with local entities or organizations. Like how do you as designers not from the community make sure you're like not stuck in your own biases? Like, is there a rubric or how are you ensuring you're getting a cross section? I'm from Oakland, California, and it's hella diverse here in every possible direction, it feels like, right? So how do you ensure you're like, yeah, this feels like a great representative, body of folks able to contribute to shaping these? That's my curiosity. Thank you.
Yeah. I don't want to answer all the questions, but I can answer how that happened so far, and then you guys come in please on anything. So yes, exactly that. So we always partner with an organization that's embedded in a community. So for example, in Canada, we were looking with Indigenous led communities groups that Dark Matter Labs already has a relationship with. We didn't end up actually partnering with one of them in the end, but there was absolutely no way that I was going to take like a methodology from Sweden and have the audacity to take it to a community that I know nothing about in Canada. So yeah, absolutely. We and maybe Maddy or Tara would like to speak to the self-selection process that we've just been through.
I can jump in on that. Yeah, we ended up developing for this iteration as well an initial workshop that would included both the presentation of cornerstones, but also a few exercises to just kind of let somebody from a community group who might want to do the project with their community to think through, okay, well, what are the goals of my community? What's currently happening in my community? How might this be useful? So that they could basically opt into the process and say, okay, I've thought this through. I'm a part of this community and I can champion it within it. Where I can partner and do a lot of that contextual groundwork and mobilization and ensuring that it's relevant to the community that we'd be working with. So that was a new addition to the process in this iteration. And thus far, we have made contact with a few different groups in the neighborhood to ensure that everybody who's coming and who's involved in the conversations feel ownership over it. and feel like it's relevant. I don't know if anyone has anything else to add.
I think I'd maybe summarize as the main point is that the process we went through was to kind of identify communities who were interested, have them kind of come to understand the process and see if they wanted to partner and lead essentially alongside us. So we're working with in Milton Park, a couple of community organizations there, and so they're the ones who are leading essentially kind of the invitation process and engagement piece of the work. Yeah, I think you had another question there too, Sophie, about kind of how yeah, actually, I don't fully remember what it was, but sort of like the extension of the cornerstones into the future. Do you want to repeat that part?
Sure. I guess I'm just curious, like, what happens after y'all leave? Like, that's maybe another way to ask the question.
Yeah. Which is maybe linked to I think Lolly has a similar question, I think, about how the metrics are now being used in Sweden. So yeah, I can speak to that. So I think what's really key is like who we partner with in the first place. So yes, a community organization, but in Sweden as well, we did a lot of workshops with the politicians there. And like, let's be real, like they were not very happy to start with about the whole thing, because some of the politicians there felt that like the indicators that came out might contradict their mandates, right? So like one of them particularly had got in on improving car access to the city, and they were like, you can't do this because, you know, it's going to raise expectations unrealistically, and, you know, citizens are going to have their kind of views and create their own indicators, and then, you know, it's going to go against what I'm going to do with my mandate. So we had some kind of work to do with that. But we ran workshops with them. So that was the first thing. And then some examples of how they're being used. So because the indicators are designed by the citizens themselves, and to get there, they're exploring all sorts of things like what they want for their community in 2035. I think that it really helps them to have then quite a lot of voice and agency over that. So right now in Sweden, in Västerås, they are developing their plans for 2035. So the Civil Servants Administration, and they're then feeding back these views from the indicators. So it's not just the indicator. And I get why there was a lot of questions about the data, but a lot of it was about drawing people in and giving them voice and agency. But the actual indicators are actively being used. And I gave the example earlier of this kind of slight contradiction between the school leaving results and then actually people's like emotional well-being falling. And so what they've been doing there is then the civil servants have been working with the medical community in Västerås to like really dig into that and work out what's going on. So I'd say it's like part diagnostic, part the people actually being able to hold those representatives to account and to like track where they're going for 2035.
Thank you. Victoria, would you like to ask your question?
Sure. Thanks very much for this. This is fascinating. I'm Victoria Hattersley with the Intermovement Impact Project and working to do place-based democracy, civic engagement, and thriving community hub, either at the state or the hyper-local level. So coming in, identifying very similar process to identifying a local champion to offer particular facilitation and help do the work, support them in doing the work to implement, to create this hub. And it's a pilot, so we're gathering a lot of information. So hearing what you guys are going through is great. And so my question is around how you get the local folks to come to your, your gatherings to start talking and brainstorming and seeing if people want to engage, because everybody's so busy is what we're finding. People are so head down, so busy. They're interested and they agree it needs to be done, but it's difficult to find the time to participate. So, and I know another project called the Great Economy Project in the States, where they actually are funded to bring people in, and they have some funding. So do you have funding? Is it all sort of volunteer, or people, and how do you persuade people to get from their very busy days to participate?
Lots of ways. And maybe again, I'll just give some examples and then Maddy or Tara, if anyone wants to come in. So in the Scottish project that Maddy mentioned, we were like working directly to feed information back to the Scottish government. So it was for a particular consultation. So what we did in that case was we partnered with like really big organizations like Oxfam. So we designed the conversational tool. Basically, it was like a conversational workshop, and we made an online website for it. But then we like persuaded people like Oxfam and Public Health England to run workshops across Scotland. So we didn't run all of them for a start, and so they already had like outreach. And in that case, we just acted as like the interface. So we processed all the data that came out of the workshops. We designed them as well, and then we also managed to then draw in a university to do the analysis with us, and then we fed all that data back to the Scottish government. So I guess I would say like you have to dance with it, right? So like we've developed some methodologies, but then it depends. Yeah, and I don't know, Tara, if you want to speak a bit about like, because obviously your David Suzuki Foundation is funding the current project.
Yeah, and I'll also pass it to Maddy to maybe chat about like how we're getting people to come out. We haven't run any workshops yet in Montreal. They're on the horizon, happening in a couple of weeks. So we'll see if our recruitment has panned out. But yeah, our Wellbeing Economies program at the David Suzuki Foundation is funding the project, but we're not funding or we don't have budget essentially to kind of pay people in the community to be participating. So it's more so funding that's being used to like organize the project, have facilitators there, that kind of side of things. But yeah, I will pass it to Maddy to chat a little bit about how we're inviting folks and making it inviting.
Yeah, I think that's the importance of having like a local partner who probably already has relationships with certain people. The organization that we're partnered with for the Montreal iteration is like anchored in a neighborhood called Milton Park that has a lot of activity in it. It's kind of got students, it's got people who live there in housing cooperatives, and various different groups who are already kind of talking to each other about the issues in the neighborhood. So it's also like a good place for it, where people are quite like, there's a lot of civic engagement already. And then yeah, just the fact that we're partnered with an organization who has those links already is helpful, right? So for example, like we made a spreadsheet and just worked on populating it with emails of anybody that we thought would be interested in participating from their network. And then we also cataloged like a few existing initiatives in the neighborhood to identify more people. So there was an email campaign, and then we also produced posters to put up physically in the neighborhood. If it's the type of place where that is like a form of mobilization, then I say go for it. We produce flyers as well. So the partner organization literally dropped flyers at people's doors. I mean, it's to reach out to residents, right? So they had some interns that were stoked to take that on. And then finally, there's also group chats and even Facebook groups. These are all different methods for mobilization depending on what's being used by that community, and these are the things that you can find out about and tap into if you are working with somebody who's really rooted in that area or in that community.
Sounds like a lot of similar approaches based on the type of work that each of us are doing. It's a bit different, but do you have and you may have said this, and forgive me if I missed it, like a playbook, a guide, tools, is that visible somewhere so other people doing place-based work like this can see your ideas?
It will be. I mean, there's an early version you're very welcome to look at. You can just type in cornerstoneconversations.org. That was the playbook that we used in Scotland, but it was a little bit specific to that, but it could easily be adapted. And then like a big part, as Maddy said, of this project is that we'll release a full suite of tools and put them like on one website.
Yeah, great.
But just like, I don't know, just as a side note, the Scottish one was designed to be done in a pub. Now, I'm not saying that everyone should do everything in a pub, but in Scotland, we're very fond of our pubs. So we designed it so anyone could run it, and the like the boards that were used could be made with like beer mats or pieces of string and stuff. And we did that actively so that like people wouldn't be off put, because we really wanted, you know, people who are not normally part of these consultations to feel like this could actually be quite good fun and that they could go do it. So
Yeah, we've
it
got
wasn't all running a pub.
similar
It's a little bit-
strategy with democracy drinks and just people just showing up.
Right. I mean, I don't
Talk
want
about-
to, you know, but
yeah.
I'm Scottish, so I can say it. We're quite fond of it.
Well, I'd love to go to one of your gatherings there in Scotland. May not
Yeah,
say
exactly.
anything, but I'll drink a lot.
Maddie, did you want to add something before the next question? Or
Oh, I was just saying, when I was going through the playbook with the community partner, we noticed the beer mats, and she was questioning a little bit. She was Googling what a beer mat is. Because we don't really have the same drinking culture here. Like, don't mind them. Everyone's just drunk in Scotland all the time. It's just
Whoa. Jackie, would you like to ask your question?
Sure. Hi.
Hi, nice to meet you.
My question, and also say I'm sorry if I kind of missed you touching on this, but since you've been doing this in different areas, and I know one of you mentioned that you have different indicators in the different areas. So I was wondering, how are you coming up with those indicators to begin with? Is it in these community engagement things that you're talking about right now, or is that after the indicators you're talking about the data? Like I was curious how you're deciding what the indicators are in each new area, and how what you're doing is the same or different depending on the place.
Yes, that's a great question. Sorry, I think this is the bit that I didn't manage to explain earlier, so thank you. So yeah, we are not deciding the indicators at all. So what we're doing is really like working with communities to work out what it is that they care about, like what thriving means to them and what that looks like into the future. And so from that, we're taking all the data that comes out of those workshops and then combining it with the statistics for their country, where we've also like done analysis to look for kind of correlations. And then we will propose the indicator based on that. So we'll take a ton of data of all these different things and then see where the clusters are, and be like, oh, well, actually, this one action could represent those 5 data points. And then this one action could represent 10. And then, so like within the people enjoying not owning a car, you know, there's obviously all these data points that sit behind that. And then we propose that indicator to the community to see if they agree with it. And they don't always, right? And that's also important. So they're like, that doesn't really sum up like what we were saying or what we were expressing, and then it gets iterated until they are happy with it. So it would be completely different depending. And just again, in Sweden, at the time there was a lot of worry about security, which we thought was to do with the war, because when we were doing it, there was like I think it was towards the Ukraine-Russia war had started. And we thought that was what was coming out, all these expressions of security, but actually they meant emotional security. And so we had that kind of wrong, and we had to, well, obviously change it. So that is, you know, it's definitely an iterative process.
Gotcha. And then I do have a quick follow-up question to that, which is like, I know you guys, since you're combining all these data sources to create the indicators. I was wondering if there's any, like, are you doing any predictive analyses? Like, the higher these indicators, the greater the well-being. Like, are you actually measuring anything like that as well, statistically, to see predictively how the indicators are working?
Yes, is the answer to that. I mean, that was the statistical part, to look at those correlations and then like compare that to what was coming out of the participatory workshops, and then try and put it all together. It's a factor analysis that like we have all written up. If anyone's interested, you're very welcome to take the tools as well. It's a Python code which we can also share.
That's great. Thank you, Emily. Wendy.
Yes, I guess I was wondering, when you have such broad indicators, such as people being happy or not happy to recommend where they live to somewhere else, what the follow-up to that is in order to dig down into the multiple factors that could be part of that. So I'm interested in how you're then following up the results of the research.
Yeah, so I guess that's kind of the same question again. I'm going to try and do a better job of answering it. So we're not, is the first thing. So the indicator is then there for that community to almost
So is it
have as like
just
a valid.
Is it just left to the local community and the local councillors or whatever the local authorities are to follow that up? You just kind of produce it and it's up to them to follow it up?
Emily,
No, no,
I think
sorry.
I might be able to help a little bit. From what I understand, is that the cornerstone measures and graphics that you're doing are tied to a whole bunch of other indicators that are coming from somewhere else that are already being compiled.
Yeah.
So this representation is taking existing collected data and indicators and expressing it in a way that's more humanistic, more resonant with people. So it's not so much that they're starting or stopping collecting data, they're just taking the data and turning it into something more relatable and humanistic. Is that right, Emily?
Yeah, that's exactly right.
Yeah.
But also we don't just leave. I mean, I totally get that question, Wendy. It's really valid.
I'm just trying to
prefer
understand
say
the dynamics of it.
no. And I'm not at all offended. That makes absolute sense to me. But what I would describe it as, we're threading in, threading out. So Maddy and I had this conversation the other day about making that very clear within the community at Milton Park. So we'll come in to support the process, but that's a very big reason for making sure that we partner with an embedded organization and making sure that we really connect with the local politicians. So it's not that we just then, oh, thanks, we've got what we want, and then we go off. I think that we're like acting as a conduit, and that's made very clear right from the start. So there wouldn't really be any reason for me to be there continuously measuring data investor us, but obviously we're still in contact.
I would also add that in this iteration, there was also the intention to include in the process maybe more specific conversations with the community around how they want to use the indicators to kind of set them up for success in that way. Like the initial like pre-engagement workshop that's more informative and allowing people to opt in, asks those questions to already kind of get them in the sense of like, okay, we're doing these workshops, we're producing these indicators so that we can do something with them, and these are what we might want to do with them. It kind of already makes that that's the goal, and then follow-up meetings while we're working with them, just to kind of keep that conversation going. But ultimately, it is up to them to take it forward.
Wendy, did you have another?
I just wanted to say, has there been any follow-up work to the degree to which, because one of the huge issues we have is you have a champion, or you have a burst of energy revolving around something which engages a community, but the moment the champion or the energy bringers move out, the whole thing doesn't move forward and drops. And I was wondering if there's any follow-up of literally going back in 6 months later to look at how that dynamic has played out. So yeah.
So yes, just very quickly, the answer to that is yes. I had a really nice session last week with the city of Westeros, but we also invited in the city of Madrid, who are doing something similar, not with us. So we used it as a session to like really explore what had happened, but also they wanted to share their learnings and pass it on.
Hi, Loretta, would you like to ask a question?
Yeah, just a really quick question. Thank you, folks, for presenting all of this. It's very fascinating. My own wheels are turning here, and it's just really a curiosity. Would you recommend this work be applied to trying to gather feedback and data from specific groups with shared and specific identities? I ask because a lot of my work is focused on advocating for a particular workforce in my region. And the struggle is there's not really the data around the well-being of this workforce. It really is actually nonprofit professionals in our region in San Diego. The data around it is just starting to grow, but I'm just fascinated at this idea of bringing that community together to advocate for a data point that could be shared at the government level with corporations or even with funders. So just curious, like, do you see it being used for like particular groups?
My answer to that would be yes. I hope so, Lotta. I mean, I would love it to act as that kind of tool for any community or group that would like to explore what matters, and to do that in a really respectful and generative way. So yes. But I guess that's kind of what it was for in the first place. And then it just became a little bit more statistical and scientific.
Awesome, thank you.
So we
I
have,
think
go ahead.
I'll just add one little bit there. I think that, and I see some comments about theory of change in the chat as well. And I think that there's different, like the indicators can be used differently depending on who is sort of stewarding the work and who's involved. So in Sweden, the local council is more deeply involved in the work than in Montreal. And in Montreal, it's more stewarded by a community organization, and how they're planning and thinking about using the indicators are different. So one is kind of, in Sweden, it's a bit more for, in some senses, the local council to make decisions and think about evolving their plans with the indicators in mind. And in Montreal, it's probably going to be a little bit more of an advocacy tool, I'm imagining. So that's just something, like, I think there's different ways and theories of change that come in depending on who's involved.
And have
Yeah. Sorry.
Please.
I was just really quickly going to say, I guess, think of it like the well-known thing is the donut, obviously. I would say it's kind of similar. It's like a tool that we hope people will take up and use in their own context. It's not saying, I'm sure you don't think this, but we're not saying like everybody should have these indicators and do it like this. That's really not the point. It's hopefully it's like an enabler and a kind of an opening to people expressing and then feeling more engaged.
And that was going to be my question, Emily, was, are you sensing, or is there any sort of formal tracking of whether or not it's triggering additional engagement of people who don't normally participate in these sort of discussions? And, you know, is that very tough to track, or is that easy to track?
I mean, I guess it's difficult to track like quantitatively. So I think like, I guess maybe because I live in Scotland and it was a much wider project in terms of like the reach of it. We really did interact with some groups that would not normally have had that kind of chance or consultation, and they have continued then on their own kind of energy and whatever with those groups to continue those conversations. So we called it cornerstone conversations. Yeah, exactly. But looking at different issues. Yeah.
How many people were polled in Scotland or participated total?
Oh, it was thousands, but not all by us.
That's
so
fantastic.
Yeah.
Thousands is a great number.
Really nice. But like we partnered with Carnegie UK on that, and they have a really big reach. And then, like I say, like, some big organizations came in. So that was really good.
So let's take our last question from Victoria, and then I'm going to do a little bit of wrap up and thank you to Maddy, Emily, Tara, and Maham. Victoria, go ahead.
My question is going to be very quick, and I just love the work that you're doing, and my brain's whirling too. How do you select your next location, and are you looking for locations to be suggested to work with organizations by any chance?
I mean, I guess that we are hoping to produce the tools this time that any of you guys could run it. And if anything, we would just be there like to support you, that's the aspiration, whether or not we get that far. And in which case, then yes, I guess we would love to partner with like another community, but our goal is to release it all.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, thank you all so much. Let's hear it for them. I don't know if everybody knows the We All Dance, but if you do, please teach it to me and start it now. And just thank you so much for all the work you're doing. And as you can see by the big turnout today and interest, that people are very excited about engaging the community more and finding new tools for metrics. So hopefully we'll get many more views on our YouTube channel, which is also a slight plug for all the other presenters who've come recently. Next month, May 14th, David Pepper, who's a great author on local and state democracy engagement, will be speaking May 14th. I put the sign up in the chat. And for those of you who took the poll, it's not too late to take the poll, but I'm going to share the results of our STAR poll. And you can see, oh, we've got a new winner that just changed. So people still signing up for it and putting it. But this is how STAR voting works. You're able to see, you're able to vote for as many as you want. You don't just have to choose one. And it's a good alternative and improvement on ranked choice voting, which I'm sure a lot of you have been hearing about. But thank you again. Maddy, any last words to leave us with?
Thanks so much for having us.
And Emily and Tara and Maham, anything else you want to share that you hadn't thought of to now? No, any dancing any of you want to do? Because we do welcome dancing. You know, we do consider joy part of a well-being community. So
I'll just say, also echo, thanks so much for having us. It's great to have a Canada, California connect. And I don't know the Wellbeing Economies dance, so I also need to learn that.
Well, you have to investigate and find out.
Yeah, usually includes a beer there, Tara.
Yes, where's our beers? And thank you, Emily, for coming so late in your evening. So,
Right.
Maham,
That's the
you look
most
like you're
successful
about to
that
say
we've had.
something. No,
No,
you're just dancing. Okay.
just
All right.
dancing.
I was sharing jazz hands as my send off. I put it in the
Oh,
chat.
wait, I hear we have an official dance leader. Sarah, are you still here?
I'm here, but
You're not dancing
can't
for us
see
tonight?
me, but I'm dancing in spirit always.
Okay, yeah, right. You know, look at you all relying on your typical senses instead of your higher senses to see her dancing. All right, thank you, everyone. Thanks, Wendy, for coming so late in your day also. Maddy, thank you so much. And hopefully we'll see you all next month. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
You.